everybody. Welcome to the Granville Exempted Village School District Board of Education meeting. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Take the roll.
Corman.
Here.
Ms. Deeds.
Here.
Janice.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Commendations?
Okay, tonight we would like to start our recognition with the Granville High School Counseling Department for receiving the Ohio School Counselors Accountability Report Award. That's called an Oscar, so that's pretty cool. The Ohio School Counselors Association presented the award to the school counselors Brandy Cooper, Cody Masters, and Liz Adams, and Secretary Bobby Seidel. In addition, Brandy Cooper received the OSCA Presidential Award for serving as president of the state association. So on behalf of the Board of Education, I'd like to thank you for your service to not only this community, but the broader counseling community. So please come on up and let's recognize you. And this is the nice plaque that Brandy received for the Granville Exempted Village Schools. So we'll have you guys hold that. Come on over here. Mr. Bernath is going to be our photographer tonight. So I'll speak, you can stand right there. I'll speak a little bit more on behalf of the department, but they have a pretty significant job. They not only have the social, emotional well-being of our students, but they also have to help them with their college application process. And having had a child go through that process, I can tell you that what they do is amazing, and you can't measure the success rate of what they do because it is truly immeasurable. So on behalf of the schools, myself as a dad, and all of the future students that you will help, thank you very much, and we appreciate everything that you do. So thank you. Thank you. Seems like the most consistent group that I commend is the Granville High School cross-country team. They tend to be very successful as athletes in our community. So the Granville cross-country team does a great job representing Granville in the state meet, and this year was no different. We would like to commend the members of the girls cross-country team who competed in the state meet. Dylan Kretschmer, Riley Zink, Alyssa Christian, Rosie Lamb, Maddie Long, Jenna Unkefer, Jenna Hyman, Kylie McFarland, and Tori Bergstrom. Please come on up. Stand right here for a second. So this is the girls' 9th consecutive state qualification as a team, and each year they have finished in the top 10. An accomplishment no other Ohio team in Division I or II can claim. So that is an amazing feat, but it also takes really high quality coaching, right? So I'd like you to invite your coaches up as well. So coaches, come on up. Chrissy Rogerson, Dave Augusta, and Bart Smith. Bart, congratulations. And girls, here we go. Now, the best part about this team is 2 weeks ago, they stopped in my office and they made me cookies. And they brought them to me. And I was kind of working on, losing weight, but I have to tell you, those were really good cookies. So who made them?
We all did.
You did? You made them as a team? Fantastic. Well, congratulations on another fantastic year. I think you guys do phenomenal work, and I'm always impressed. This was the first year I haven't been to the state meet, and it killed me. So next year I'll be back when you're back. So congratulations, and good luck in the indoor season. All right, take care. Thank you.
Photograph.
Oh, photograph. Oh, that's right. Sorry.
Coaches.
Dave, not so easy.
Almost got away.
All right. I think we're good. Sorry about that. So we don't typically do this next commendation, but we would like to recognize our 7th grade science teacher, Scott Kruger, who is leaving GMS mid-year to leave for the military full-time. I know the students and staff are going to miss you greatly. I know that in the Brown household, Lily, my daughter who had you last year, asked what I did wrong and why, you're not staying. But Scott is one of those teachers that has the perfect blend of the art and the science of teaching. And he understands how to motivate people and maximize potential, which is something that I think the military finds desirable as well, which is why they want to put you in charge of a lot of people. And so, I'm glad that Lisa recognized talent. Where's Lisa back there? Recognized talent, and I'm happy for you for this next chapter in your life. But I think you've done it with character and integrity, and I know that that's something that you were taught by your parents. So I was at the recent Veterans Day celebration that the 6th graders did as a project-based learning experience, and Scott shared his love of the country and his sacrifice through service. And now he's taking that to the next level. Scott, we're going to miss you tremendously, and we wish you all the best, and I'd like you to come on up at this time. So one of my favorite stories of Scott, other than the ones that we've had on the golf course, is he was deployed, and we didn't know if he was going to be back for our opening convocation. And literally the night before, Lisa called me and says, he's home. And I said, well, it would be fantastic if he was able to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So he came on stage when no one knew he was back, and it was pretty cool. So I'll just leave it at that because I don't want to get emotional. So, and now we have a special presentation by Jeff Chambers from the Ohio School Boards Association to recognize a 5th grader, Beckett Long, who's sitting right here, and I'll let Mr. Chambers explain.
For over the last 15 years, the Ohio School Board Association has worked with area schools, our teachers of elementary and intermediate school buildings, to help us come up with a holiday card that we then send out to all of the people that we work with. And this year we worked with Amanda Tucker at the Granville Intermediate School, and she had a number of her classes work on designs. And she went through and selected a number of them and passed them on to the association, and then we went through a very complex process of setting them all out on the table and letting the entire staff vote on them. And then we selected one. We selected Beckett's this year. And I'd like to recognize him and thank him for his design. And I have some things for you, if you'd come up here. rich. And for the district, here are the ones samples of what we actually used, how they looked when we stuck them in the mail to everyone we worked with.
Excellent. Fantastic.
And also is an appreciation of our thanks for you. Thank you very much. And just to let you know, there are 6 more days of holiday shopping.
But, okay, Beckett, come on over. So on behalf of the schools, we have our Excellence Award. So you can wear that pin proudly, and you're one of the youngest people to receive that. So usually we give that to our junior high and our middle school and high school students. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And well done.
Thanks.
Now we're going to get a picture. Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Madam President, thank you very much for letting us do that.
Thank you for being here. Thank you.
So that concludes our commendations, and so you will not hurt our feelings as we move into the next portion of our meeting if you need to depart at this time. Okay, thank you.
Sorry I was late. There was no parking.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Did you get my text message?
I heard it ding as I was coming down.
Yeah, I was like, someone took your spot.
I'm not sure, like, you park here and see. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, it's fine. I kind of made my own spot in the Granville Inn lot.
Okay.
Let's see what happens.
Our kids are pretty sad about Mr. Kruger leaving.
Yeah, I think it was good.
Oh, yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Ethan's studying. It is exam season, so Ethan is studying. Good excuse, you know?
Well, I suppose that's okay.
Yeah. So we will
No waiver
move-
involved, huh?
We will move right into our principal reports on the continuous improvement plans and process. And we are going to start with Mr. Morris.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. On behalf of the principals, I just want to say thank you to the board for your continued leadership. We appreciate the time and the effort it goes into running a district, and so we really appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. The continuous improvement plans are really part of that growth mindset, that continuous improvement process, always finding ways where we can build on our strengths and continue to grow and do what's best for the students and the families in our schools. So we appreciate the opportunity to share this with you. So the elementary school, I'd like to start with our strengths. And the first 2 bullets really focus on how kids feel about being at school. And I get really excited about the very first one, looking just 97% of our students, and this was 3rd graders leaving last year, 97% of them felt like they enjoyed being at school. And that's a huge pride for us at the elementary school, because we want kids to come to elementary loving school. Do we want that to be 100%? Absolutely. And so there's an element for growth there, but I can say that 97% is nice because it's growing. Every year we see that number kind of creep up just a little bit more. And then 98% saying they are learning new things at school. So we're challenging our kids. They're feeling like they're getting enriched. They're feeling like their teachers are doing a good enough job that they're being challenged and are learning the new skills that they need to learn. We noticed a huge success in decreasing the stress of our kids. We put a lot of effort last year into talking about kinds of homework that we're assigning, especially at the 2nd and 3rd grade level, what kind of expectations we have for our students outside of the classroom, and then how we're setting up our kids for success in the classroom. And so seeing that number decrease by 13% was a celebration for us. I'm kind of going along with that is the last bullet, which talks about awesomes. We use PACS as our positive behavior support at the elementary school. And part of PACS is something called what they call Toodles. And we didn't love the name Toodles as a way of recognizing students for leadership. So as part of our discussion, we changed them to Awesomes. What is your awesome today? Recognizing our kids for the awesomes that they're doing. And so last year, every single student at the elementary school, so just under 700 kids received one awesome. Several kids received more than that. This year, we are actually on track to every kid receiving possibly 3 awesomes. And we're only almost halfway through the year. So we're really excited just to be able to recognize our kids, even for the tiniest little things that they do, random acts of kindness, that sort of thing. We have a leader trait, a PAX leader trait of the week, and we like to focus on those, and those have helped support our students because they focus on them and try to get those awesomes by matching those traits. And then the third bullet there is based on our third grade state assessment. As you know, the third graders, this is the first time they take a statewide assessment. They're used to MAP and some other assessments, but this is their first statewide assessment. All of our third graders met the provisions of the guarantee for promotion to fourth grade. So those are our strengths, and kind of looking at where our areas of need are, we look at what are our building initiatives. What do we need to focus on this year? We really landed on 3 big initiatives. The first one you've seen before is that consistent, continuing to focus on balanced literacy. This is always an area of growth for us, just because we know we can always do a little bit better and a little bit better. And we'll talk a little bit more about that with Mrs. Losco. We also are continuing to focus on math, and specifically math problem-solving strategies. We're seeing that as an area of need for our students. So in that, we're doing a lot of professional development around something called number talks, how our kids talk about math and how they think about math. There's a lot of great research behind numbers talks, as well as a lot of resources for us. We have several teachers on a math committee who are developing that PD, and we're spending the second half of the year really working on that. And of course, we're focusing on project-based learning. This is our implementation year for project-based learning. And so as we continue to implement, we're also doing more PD. We're reading articles. We're working with the ESCCO to help with continued professional development. And what I love about the professional development and doing the implementation year is that it's creating some more collaboration, different kinds of collaboration than we may have seen before. Teachers are finding themselves working across grade levels and across departments that we didn't necessarily see all the time. In elementary school, you're used to seeing grade levels working together because they're so much in sync. But seeing multiple grade levels working together and working directly with special teachers and that sort of thing is a little bit new for the elementary school, at least in my tenure there. So we're really excited to see that occurring because of project-based learning. So I shared a few of the projects that we're that some of the teachers are focusing on this year. Sustaining the declining bee population was a project we actually saw last year. It is now kind of expanding into other classrooms. Multiple classrooms are doing the playground redesigns. I think at some point we'll have a water slide on the GES playground, so I'm looking forward to that one. There's also supposed to be a fire pit where we can roast marshmallows all year long. So, I think the fire pit was larger than the parking lot at one point. Mr. Drake, our PE teacher, has really embraced PBL. He really is kind of seeing out. It really can help him challenge students, not just physically, but also academically. So one of his projects is incorporating fitness and learning and having the kids create games that they can do, whether it's in phys ed class or outside of school, that incorporate not just the fitness aspect of it, but even nutrition and so forth. And so he's really excited about that. We have one of our third grade classrooms who is visiting multiple farms around the community and talking with them about how we go from the farm to table and how effective is that, and doing research behind that. That's pretty exciting as well. And I actually met with a kindergarten teacher today who was extremely thrilled about her project, and her project's called Who is Your Hero? And so it's helping her kindergarten students identify the traits of who heroes are. Who are the heroes of our history? Who are the heroes in our community? Who are the heroes in our families? And those students are going to identify who their heroes are as 6- and 7-year-olds, which is really neat, and then share with them, with their class and with some other classes as well, talking about what makes somebody a hero and who are those heroes. I didn't have a chance to put that in here, but I'm excited to see the product of that one. Any questions just on what I've shared so far from the elementary school? So this time, Mrs. Losco is going to join me because, as I mentioned, the balanced literacy that we're focusing on is not only a K-3, it's also a 4-6 initiative as well. And balanced literacy is always an evolving process, but really we're looking at building some consistent structures and expectations so that as our students go from grade level to grade level to grade level, they're not relearning how to do literacy instruction. They can easily walk in from a third grade classroom into a fourth grade classroom and know what those expectations are, know what those routines are. There might be tweaks and nuances, but they know what those are. And so the idea being that every year is just one more layer of success. so our kids are not going through the difficulty of kind of relearning all those things. Part of this initiative is also some new resources. At the elementary school specifically, we are rolling out a phonics resource to help our teachers with some more direct instruction in phonics. And right now we're at kindergarten through second grade. Next year, third grade, we'll take on that resource as well. And we've seen success with it, not just on the assessment data, but even kids applying their phonics skills throughout other content areas as well. As you know, we have two coaches, K-6. We have Amanda Gurney at the elementary school and Molly Coffey at the intermediate school. Both are new to the district this year, which might be kind of concerning, but I have to tell you, they've hit the ground running. They are two very different personalities, two different approaches to professional development and to working with staff and to developing and rolling out a vision. But they are very cohesive in how they work together. They are very like-minded in the goals that they have, and like-minded with us as administrators and the goals that we have as well. And so they work with individual teachers as well as grade levels, as well as the whole building. And several times they've worked together with the K-6 staff. And we've gotten a lot of great feedback from staff about the work that they've done, and are really looking forward to the continued journey with them and developing our K-6 literacy initiative. So you.
There you go. Next is Annette Lasco, standing in for Gail, who's been doing a fantastic job as Gail is recovering from knee surgery. So thank you very much, Annette, for being here.
You're welcome. Next, we have some exciting professional development that's going to be happening this summer. We have teachers' colleges coming in August, and they're going to be providing PD around reading units of study. And the majority of our language arts staff is participating in that, and they will be giving up some of their own summer to participate in that professional development. And finally, we have developed, along with the literacy coaches, we developed a short and a long-term vision. Our short-term vision is that we will be building capacity of the staff to provide quality instruction K-6. And then that long-term vision is working on that growth mindset so that as we see needs arise, that we will be able to refine our practice. And now moving on to Granville Intermediate School. First, our building strengths. GIS met all state indicators on our local report card, earning an A designation. We also earned an A for overall progress in reading and in math. I'm sorry, I have to keep looking at this because I can't see it from here. And we met the gifted indicator on the local report card as well. The last three are all three taken from our 6th grade exit survey results. And we have 95.2% of our students that feel that they have been an active participant in their learning. 92.9% of our students feel their classes stretched their thinking. And finally, we have students reported that their stress levels fell 35.5% to 28.6% this past year, and that's a drop of almost 7%. Building initiatives. 2 of these are in line with district initiatives. So the first one is focusing on PBL. And as Mr. Morris said, all staff and students will be participating in at least one PBL project this year. Most of the students will be participating in more than one. The last one is working on co-teaching. All teachers in the district participated in professional development around co-teaching so that we could improve that classroom environment and make it more conducive to co-teaching. Our 2 middle bullets there are more focused on the building initiative, and the first one is units of study that Travis spent a lot of time talking about. We have at 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, at least once a week, our teachers are meeting with the reading, the literacy coach and planning lessons. So the same thing is happening in all of our language arts classrooms. And then we also are doing the same thing with our math teachers. They are participating in guided math workshops. And at the beginning of December, we had 7 of our math teachers attend a conference, and they are going to be presenting to the rest of the staff at our January PD day. 4th grade goals. 4th grade has been working with depth of knowledge. We've had someone come and do professional development with the staff, and they have created quarterly common assessments for both reading and math. That work started about 2 years ago with 4th grade, and we will be continuing that we've started that process with 5th grade. So our goal is to get up to 6th grade within the next year or so. Math workshop is the focus for the second one, that they will continue to implement and reflect on their practice. And then finally, reading units of study that they are meeting weekly and planning with the literacy coach. 5th grade goals, again, units of study, that's really a big focus for our building. We are now at the point where even our 6th grade staff who wasn't participating at the beginning of the year, they've seen such great results from the professional development that's happened with 4th and 5th grade teachers, and they've come on board and are participating as well. So that's something that's really exciting, and I think is really a tribute to our literacy coach. And as I mentioned earlier, 5th grade is beginning that work on depth of knowledge training and creating quarterly common assessments. 6th grade, their primary goal for this school year is implementing Genius Hour, and during Smart Period, all 6th grade students are participating in a Genius Hour project. They've selected a topic that they are interested in, and based on the topic, they've been assigned a mentor. So we had some students who were interested in gaming and coding, so their mentor is Beth Downing, our technology coach, and she has some of our star students going and working with them, and it is really an exciting project that they're working on. So this year, 6th grade is going to be presenting those at the end of the year. Like in the past, they've done the 6th grade graduation. This year, they're going to be showcasing their Genius Hour projects. And then finally, some of the projects that are happening at Granville Intermediate. You heard Mr. Brown talk about the Veterans Day Assembly, and that was completely done by our 6th grade students. 5th grade did Exploring Sound through creating individual musical instruments. This was a collaboration between our science department and music department, and the students also had the opportunity to go to the Owens Corning Sound Lab and do some of their research there, so that was a pretty exciting opportunity for them. 6th grade is doing Genius Hour, and then 4th grade is working on exploring Earth surface changes and animal and plant adaptations, and they're using the GIS Land Lab to research those adaptations. And now, Lisa Ormond.
Hello, good evening. Okay, so for Granville Middle School, you know, the wonderful adolescent zone, my favorite age. So some of our building strengths. So you'll see how these all tie together hopefully after I'm done, but I highlighted there how 96% of our 8th graders said they have friends at school. That's pretty important as I speak through the next slide as well. But the one thing I want to note about the 8th grade exit survey, we do get valuable information from there. And a couple years ago, in working with Mr. Durst, because he helps lead that, we realized that we were given the survey a little later in May, so we wouldn't get the results until like right at the end of the school year after the students were gone. And we would have all these questions. We just weren't really sure, like, well, I wonder why they did that, or why they say this, and that doesn't make any sense to us. So in working with Mr. Durst, we were able to bump the survey up a little sooner, so we got the results back while they were still at school. And so we actually do have follow-up questions with groups of 8th graders trying to understand how they responded to some of the questions. So starting this year, Ms. Postal, she's our school counselor, she starts giving a survey now to incoming 7th grade right away so that we can hit some of these topics and not wait until they're getting ready to go to high school. And so one of the big things that she hit upon this year, even though we were 5 weeks into the school year, but one of the questions that she asked was, have you already made a connection with an adult in the building? Is there someone you feel like you can go to? And there were 31 7th graders at that time who had not made a connection. So Ms. Postal made a list, she sent it out to all the staff, and then she followed up in team meetings and at a staff meeting just to make sure that we're making those connections. So that's just one example of things that we're trying to do. Also this year, we've needed this for a while. We were just trying to figure out how to pull it off, but we added an ELA study skills class for students that just need that extra help and support with language arts and reading and writing. And we met with the high school staff. Mrs. Smith and Mrs. Hartshorn have been doing this at the high school, so we've met with them a few times. Once school got started this year, we met with them again because we had questions and whatnot. But so far, it seems to be going really well. Parents, students, and teachers are very pleased with some of the progress that we seem to be making based on pre-assessments that we've given and whatnot and MAP scores. The weekly help sessions, that's something we've always offered at the middle school, but the only reason I highlight it is because when I attend my monthly county administrator meetings, I guess I'm just amazed that that really is rather unique to Granville. It's not something that many other middle schools, at least in Licking County, offer, that teachers have, quote, like office hours before school and after school to help support students. And so we're doing a better job of logging who all is coming and what they're coming for and keeping track of how often we're helping students. So that's pretty important. And then our ACE days, we've had ACE period now for, oh gosh, several years, and we've modified it various ways over the years. But it initially started as an intervention period. Then it morphed into intervention enrichment, and now it's morphed into the whole child and being balanced. So we offer the yoga, the mixed choir, service projects. We're starting some barbell clubs, and as I keep talking, you'll see why that's also important. So some of the initiatives that we have going on this year, obviously PBL is a district-wide initiative. So it's going very well at the middle school. One thing I did want to bring up is that 8th grade science this year did a really neat project with Force in Motion. And the students had to assemble cars, and their passenger was an egg. And so it was really interesting. And Mrs. Yeager and Mrs. White made a really strong connection with the Transportation Research Center and the National Highway Safety Committee. And so they sent out scientists and engineers to our school and worked with the students. It was really amazing. And now we get to send students to the Transportation Research Center in January. And they're really excited. They said they've never worked with schools before. They want to come back. And so it's really neat. But I mean, that's just one example of a connection that we've made and some of the students and what they did and the videos that we took. You know, some teachers are still learning their way through PBL, and I think that's to be expected. I mean, we're just now getting through it. But the one thing I try to emphasize is that there's 8 design elements, and you know, maybe you're not hitting all those on a daily basis in your classrooms. Let's focus on those. Are you giving students voice and choice? If not, okay, let's focus on that. And then over time, then I think those elements will all come together and form into a nice PBL project. So the one-to-one technology has been wonderful. There's been bumps along the way here and there, and I was fortunate that a majority of the middle school staff did attend some of the training that was offered this summer. So throughout this school year, I have time set aside, and I've worked with Evan McCullough to get those set up so that the teachers who didn't attend the training can get it throughout the school year. And if the other teachers who did attend want a refresher, then that's fine as well. But we've had some really good conversations. So right before school started, we were talking about, well, is there a need for cell phones? If we're one-to-one, do we really need the cell phones anymore? We didn't come to a conclusion, but I will say that every month when we get together, it's something we continue to talk about. So the one thing I'm fortunate about there is that Mrs. Mackley, our school librarian, she's been trying really hard to dig and research to find tools that they can utilize with a Chromebook that they don't rely as heavily then on their cell phone. And so one thing that's been really popular here lately is that she went into all the language arts classrooms and showed the students how to use Google Keep for reminders and lists and different things. And I'm really amazed at how many students are trying to implement it and the things that they can do with it. Like the minute you fire up your Chromebook, if you've set these alerts, these Post-it notes start popping up and telling you things to do, like turn in your homework or go see this teacher or do that or whatnot. So we just keep talking about that. We also keep talking about, we really try to monitor how many students are on their cell phones at lunch, because we feel a strong need for students to be able to talk face-to-face and not behind a screen, because that's a problem. So we're trying to keep an eye on that. And right now we don't feel it's a heavy use, but it's something that we're trying to monitor as well. But this third one really, in my opinion, is the most important thing that we're trying to tackle this year. It's just school culture and climate in general. We've definitely seen an uptick at the middle school, just in character, tolerance, empathy, you name it, slurs against maybe a race, sexual orientation, religious beliefs, political viewpoints. And so it's definitely something that we're trying to figure out what's the best way to tackle it. So right now I'm in the process of identifying students who want to be a part of a focus group with me. And I've reached out to Denison. I've got a couple of people there I'm working with, including students and professors, I've got a couple parents on board that are helping me. And we're just trying to come up with a way to have a group of students come together on a weekly basis to see, okay, what are your viewpoints? What are you seeing? What's happening at Granville Middle School? And what can we do? What can we do to bring about tolerance and change in our building? And I just really strongly believe that I need their input and their voice in order for it to make an impact. So I'm in the process of doing that right now. So fingers crossed that good things come of that. I feel confident. So, and then the last thing at the middle school that we've been focusing on is co-teaching. We hit that pretty hard before school and here in the fall. So, and the one unique thing about that is co-teaching can be very powerful, but when you start to get up to the secondary level, the one thing you have to remember is the content gets really specific, especially when you start talking math and science, and intervention specialists are typically more of a generalist. They're not content specialists. And so you just have to be creative in how you do things with small groups and whatnot. And so, sometimes I've shared with teachers that, if you've got a group of 6 or 7 students that are really struggling with some type of math concept in algebra or whatever it may be, well then maybe it's the algebra teacher who should work with those students and the special ed teacher should stay back with the rest of the group. But it's gone really well, and the conversations that the middle school staff has been put together and forced to have, the high school staff has already been doing this for a few years, but we got the middle school staff on board this year. So the conversations have been really good. And our hope is, even though the numbers like for inclusion and whatnot and resource classes, it's all based on student need every year. But our hope is if we can keep intervention specialists with certain teachers as much as possible year after year, then they'll grow comfortable with that content, and then that co-teaching atmosphere will just begin to flourish. So that's our hope. Any questions? Yes.
I have one, Lisa. On your bullet point, your third bullet point about attending to the culture and the climate, that's obviously important to all of us and important to our community. And so I applaud you for focusing on that. But what can we do as an administrative body to support that? How can we help that?
Well, my first thought is, I don't know. I guess time will tell. I guess I'm curious to find out what this group of students is going to have to say. But I guess it's just, as people approach you or whatnot, making sure people understand that I've had many conversations this year with several different families about, Granville is a public education. It's a wonderful facility. It's a great place to have your students learn and grow, but it is public education, and we welcome everyone. I don't care who you are, what you believe in, you're welcome at my school. And so to get everyone to understand that that's truly what we believe. But I honestly, as I work with these students more and more, then I would be more than happy to share any ideas they have with you, or if we come up with something.
Yeah. And do you sense that some of the culture is maybe driven by the class that you have in 8th grade, for example, that's more boy heavy, or is it more outside societal changes that are being reflected in the attitudes of the students and so forth? You kind of know, what's your initial sense there?
I really don't. I don't think it's grade specific. I really don't. But I really think it's several things. I honestly, I really think it's the world we live in nowadays. I think it's our country as a whole, and things that we're dealing with, and what they see on TV and what they see with social media, and how adults are behaving towards one another, and thinking that's acceptable. And I also believe it has a lot to do with just technology in general. So we're trying really hard. Mrs. Mackley, again, and Ms. Postal are doing a lot of lessons around technology and what's appropriate, not appropriate, and how do you use it, and how can it be an effective tool versus not so effective. But so I think there's a lot of factors that maybe we don't have a direct influence on, but when they're with us from 8 to 2:50, I hope we can have an impact that hopefully will carry beyond the school day.
And I think we've got a unique opportunity. We have a great middle school with that 7th and 8th grade age. It's always been very focused on making that, social emotional transition between, the younger grades and the high school. And it's kind of something that's always been a cornerstone of what we've done there at the middle school. And I think your awareness of, changes that are happening broader and proactivity toward, what we can do better is really encouraging. So thanks for continuing to focus on that.
And I think we've been looking more systemically at bullet point 3 But as you're going through this process and learning from the students, we're going through this process as a district, as a system.
Right.
You know, Russ asked me the same question the other day, and I said,
Mhm.
I don't know either.
Yeah.
You know, we're still understanding what some of the issues are that we're facing, because I think it's evolving, and it
Mhm.
has evolved, and so it's something that I think the board is committed to, and the administration is committed to, and I think, you know, we have little things that we're trying, you know, like the yoga, the therapy dog, you know, all those types of things.
Mhm.
But I think, you know, again, what we want to do is try and build a system, and we're just trying to understand the issue right now. So I think it's great work.
Yeah, thank you.
I just signed up for a graduate class that starts in January. It's called the Mindful School Leader, and it's about social and emotional intelligence and whatnot. So I'm really looking forward to that class.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
I think as we all know, the beauty of working with people is that we see the whole person, and so we see the warts and we see the beauty as well. And I think, you know, as Lisa shared, and you'll see this up at the high school as well, that it's a unique opportunity to work with students through this period in their lives, because they're acquiring and learning so much, and they're in that process of becoming in a real focused way. And so I think if we can take advantage of those situations and really promote growth through them, then I think we win. One of the things that I've been able to share with some people this year, they specifically asked me, what is the best thing about your job? And the idea that you can walk a student through a mistake or an undesirable choice, but that you can see them grow in response. That's really one of the best parts, I think, of it any of us does. Not that we wish for them to fall and trip up and fail, but now is a really good time for them to do that, because they're sleeping in their own bed in their own house. They're eating at their table with their parents. And so better now than years down the road when they're off on their own. As we start to take a look at the high school, I want to start with the highlights or the building strengths. You can see there that I've included information from last year's report card. That's the state-issued report card. These are grades that you have seen before. You've got really good explanations from Mr. Bernath as to what these things actually mean in the way of achievement and gap closing and the others that are listed there. But in terms of the first strength that we've got listed there, we try not to focus too hard on those things, but we do like to celebrate them when they come back looking like that. The second bullet there points again to exit survey data. You guys have heard a lot about exit survey data tonight. And you can see there that we've got approximately 9 out of 10 students who are indicating emotional safety, and then 98% feeling physical safety while they're at the high school. Student growth data was above expected in those following topical areas listed: Algebra 1, Geometry, English 1, and English 2. The 2016-17 ACT average for GHS students was right at 25.6. And then Dr. Kornman can speak to statistics with the final bullet. 87% of AP exams were scored at a 3 or higher. And you see there the numbers: 213 out of 241 students earned a 3 or higher on at least one AP exam. Just for a refresher, if a student makes his or her way through an AP course and they earn a 3 or higher on the AP exam in May, it's a guarantee of college credit at a public university in the state of Ohio. So a parent's investment in that is 9 months of headache, turmoil, and hard work, and watching their student go through that course, $93 for an exam fee, and then they reap the benefits of college credits if they choose to stay in-state. So that's a tremendous number. We continue, the reason I mentioned Dr. Kornman and statistics, we continue to add AP exams taken every year. At the same time, we continue to grow the percent that score at a 3 or higher. It's not supposed to work that way in a statistical world. And so that's a number that we have fun with every fall when we see that. In terms of the building initiatives, this really ties back to the focus and the conversation that we've had over the last 2 years about substance use. And you're very familiar with that conversation. 2 things that started this year as a result of that conversation were the implementation of the Too Good for Drugs curriculum. That's, as you know, has been implemented K-12. and additionally, the implementation of the extracurricular substance use prevention policy at the high school. That has been a nice opportunity for me to really speak at a number of meetings that I typically would not have a presentation at. It's not often that I frequent the drama club meeting in September to help set the stage for the year. That's Sarah Sharp's job, and she does it very, very well. But it was a good opportunity for me to address approximately 100 students and their parents on the different layers of policy that we have that really supports this idea of making solid and correct choices as it relates to substance use. I see that as a definite win in terms of continuing that conversation. One of the things that I heard last spring from the board was the conversation has been so good, and it's really brought this issue to the forefront. If we can sustain the conversation, that in and of itself is a win for us. So that's been a nice way for us to continue that conversation with a lot of different components and niche groups at the high school. Because we're involving more than just the more than just the athletics, we're bringing in mock trial, we're bringing in youth in government and the drama productions. It's a way for us to bleed into the rest of the student body to make sure that that message continues.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, absolutely.
So the Too Good for Drugs, is that being implemented in health class?
It is.
And so for those students who have already done health, what are we doing? Are they getting the messages? Are they getting, information?
Sure.
as well?
What Carly's doing this year is she's getting her feet under her in terms of the implementation of that curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
With it being new, she's walking through it. What we hope to do is actually grow that into other courses. Because it's more of a life skills-based curriculum rather than a biological, anatomical health curriculum. As she familiarizes herself with that curriculum, we're then making connections into other topic areas so that we can grow it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks.
Sure. At the high school, this is going to be somewhat similar to the elementary and intermediate schools in the way that they've developed goals. As a grade level, we develop them as a department. And so I'm not going to walk through 8 departments with you. I'm going to give you 2 different samples that I think are very representative of the goals that the departments are creating. You can see here that the English department has got 3 goals listed. They are implementing this year an improved essay revision process, including a revision rubric to maximize student writing growth. In a nutshell, you submit your first draft of an essay, and then you're receiving feedback from the teacher. Your next submission, which is a forced rewrite, we know the growth happens on the rewrite process. The forced rewrite, you're focusing on deficient areas. You're not rewriting as a whole. And so it's streamlining the process for you as a learner. It's also streamlining the process for feedback in terms of what the teacher is delivering. That is something that they continue to polish. If E.B. Smith was standing next to me, she would say, it's not how we want it yet. It's not perfect yet, but we're moving in that direction. The second bullet there talks about a process for essay creation and submission. Because of the wide range of technology platforms that our students use and or are familiar with, we're really trying to streamline this on their behalf. At the same time, we want them to be proficient in as many different platforms as possible, because as they make the jump to the university level, we can't predict what they'll be using. And so will it be a Google Docs environment? Will it be Turnitin? Will it be an LMS like Schoology or Blackboard? So we want them to have familiarity with all of those things. That really fits in well with the one-to-one implementation that Lisa mentioned earlier, because the students have really embraced that. The final one there is to revise the GHS style book to include updated and revised MLA examples to enhance the research process. I would say one of the staples of the English department at the high school that we hear year in and year out from graduates is, I know how to write, and my roommate has no clue. And one of the pillars there is that annual research paper that they grow from grade 9 all the way up through grade 12. The second example here that I have of department goals is special ed. And this is going to tie in some of that PBL work that we're doing as well. The first bullet there really highlights that. The intervention specialists are collaborating on a PBL project to improve the learning environment of the room that they teach out of. So in room 101, if you're ever at the high school, I'll walk you down and show it to you. But in a nutshell, you're taking students from the social studies class, and they're going to be working with the civics portion of this. And so as they research what this learning environment could look like, they're looking at building codes and what's the process look like for those types of things. So think civic-minded from the social studies students there. On the math end of things, well, we're worried about measurements, and we're worried about the layout of the room and how that's going to be presented on a financial way as it relates to how much carpet do we need, how much paint would we need, how much of this or this would we need. On the science side of things, are we high odor, are we low odor with our paint on the walls, and what's the difference between those two? So it's a nice opportunity for those different courses or different topical areas to focus their energy on the same space so that they can redesign that learning space for themselves. The second and third goals there are really very similar in nature, but what you see is that you've got ELA study skills and resource English collaborating to create IEP goals. Now, they're not collaborating with one another. They're actually going out to the general education teacher and they're saying, you know what? It makes sense that we develop a consistent language and a consistent set of goals to progress a student through reading or math. You see the different uses there as it relates to their progression in high school. So a student enters the freshman year and they've got a deficient area that's targeted by an IEP in the area of reading. And so how are we going to scaffold their progress as it grows through from 9th grade through 12th grade? So let's go ahead and just develop that in advance. That way we understand the progression for ourselves, and as we write IEP goals, we're writing in a way that really complements that process. We are extending that to some of the global language. This is not up here, but we've actually got global language teachers working with some of the intervention specialists to create banks of accommodations or different suggestions for use on IEPs that would help and really lay out well in a global language environment. Obviously, if you are an IEP student who struggles in your own native language, what does that look like in terms of support for a second language that you're hoping to acquire? So that's been a fun process for them this year as well. And then the last one up there, teachers of math study skills and inclusion math classes will collaborate again with their colleagues. So we're taking this reading emphasis and that collaboration, rolling it into math as well. Now this one specifically looks at the parameters of that math study skills course. Basically, what are we attempting to do in this course in terms of growing their academic skills? And then how does that affect and impact our placement of students into that course? And then if students don't fit in, then what? So they're starting with a list of questions that they're walking through so that as we move into advising and scheduling here, not in the near too distant future here, we'll have a better understanding for the way that works. It's a nice way to state expectations for ourselves so that we can then follow those expectations as students move into those. You're not looking at rehauling of these things, you're looking at refining and polishing them. Any questions that I can answer for you? Again, this year we've taken 2 to 3 minutes per person, and we have not followed that at all.
It's phenomenal. Actually, so I'd like to just, a couple of things came to mind as the principals were talking. Jim Collins says, good is the enemy of great. And, in a lot of organizations that are very successful on just about any measure that you are looking at, it's very difficult to embed a continuous improvement mentality. And so that takes leadership and focus. And I think what you just saw from the 4 principals that presented is that leadership and focus, that, that continuous improvement mentality of trying to get better in whatever it is. And that focus, it sounds like a lot of initiatives, but they're very specific to specific groups of teachers. Especially in the elementary with the balanced literacy approach and then the math departments. Well, those are 2 different sets of teachers, but the principals have to facilitate both. And I think we as an organization are looking holistically at well-being, the social, emotional, and physical well-being of our students. And I think you heard from Lisa, the real challenge of that as an organization, because it is societal and cultural. And so, but they're not afraid to tackle those things. And I think that's the sign of fantastic leadership. And I'm really happy with my team right now.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. Here. Yeah.
yeah, it's a product of a lot of people working together, and Mr. Bernath does a fantastic job of kind of coordinating all of that, so,
Mhm.
well done.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exciting.
Yeah?
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So now in order to sustain that, Michael's gonna give you a little presentation. And I have granted our principals permission to leave.
Thanks for being here with
So-
us. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I just say how much I?
Tanya, sit back down. That was way too bad.
I just want to say I really like Mr. Durst's tie.
Yes.
I think it's a very nice selection.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good night.
Okay, this really is just a brief presentation, just to kind of introduce us into the discussion that will be forthcoming among you folks here in a few minutes. What I want to do is just give a little bit of update on where the forecast is right now and the couple options that we are looking at as far as income tax options and what that means financially. This slide is showing the top part, the top left is the October forecast. The bottom is the current forecast. The forecast has improved from where it was in October. Most of that is from the choices of health insurance our employees made at open enrollment. We were expecting about a 70-30 split between people taking the low plan and the high plan. It actually ended up the reverse of that. It was actually 72% took the high plan. That has a little bit more cost in the short run, but is a cost saving in the long run because the premium base is now going to be lower, and so any increases in premium are off of a lower base. And so that gives us the improvement, especially in the out years. You'll see actually in the short run, it's not quite as, it's not quite as beneficial. The couple other things that have happened that have helped us a little bit, our state aid is actually a little bit higher than we thought it would be. In October, we were looking to be on the formula. We are actually right now cap funded by about 5 kids. So we were just barely on the cap. So we are now getting the maximum amount we could grow by, mostly because of some recalculations of a couple things and how we were accounting, how I've been accounting for them. Our enrollment, our ADM, our average day of membership, ended up a little bit higher than it was. And then the third thing that's helping us is our tangible property tax valuation was about $500,000 higher than I've been projecting, and that we get dollar for dollar growth at the full voted rate, not just the effective rate. And so that's worth, again, $35,000 to $40,000 a year, which doesn't sound like much until you multiply it by 5.
Right.
And now it's a couple $100,000 by the time you get out to the end of the forecast period. The big item, and this helps us in our, as far as honing in what we want to do as far as the levy, is in the October forecast, we are projecting where that big red arrow is, about $3.75 million operating shortfall in 2021-22 school year. We are now looking at about a $3.3 million operating shortfall. Again, about $400,000 better. And so that does help us in the long run as far as sizing our levy. The levy overview and what we have we're showing here are 2 earned income levy options, a 1% and a 1.25%. Both would include the movement of 2.75 inside mills over 2 years from operating to PI to fund the PI levy, to our PI budget and our PI needs. The 2.75 mills would allow us to meet our annual facility maintenance needs, at least for quite a while, we believe.
Either of the options would also provide for between a 2.25 and 2.5 mil reduction in property taxes for the 2019 tax year paid in 2020, so 1 year following the implementation of the new levy. And that would be from a combination of us allowing our current PI levy to expire and not renewing it, our half mil levy, maintenance levy expiring, which we can't renew anyway, and then the impact of the bond refunding from about 1.5 years ago. Starting next year, our payments on our debt starts going down, and so we're able to reduce our bond rate by a little bit for
Let me highlight
2019.
just one aspect of the conversation around the maintenance needs. You know, we generate roughly $1 million annually for our permanent improvement needs or our facility needs. Several years ago, we went through a process and we created a 20-year facility plan that looks at building mechanicals, asphalt, concrete, flooring, furniture, all of those types of things, and we built a schedule. And we took that long 20-year plan and we chunk it into, you know, a year plan and a 5-year plan. The challenge is when we have older facilities, some things break that are outside of the plan, and it can throw a wrench into, you know, what our budgeted plan is and what our actual, you know, expenditures are. And when you have a $400,000 blip, you know, it's kind of like when your furnace goes out at home. Most people don't have a furnace fund. You know, they have to take it out of operating or, you know, whatever is going on at that time. So we're continually challenged with the maintenance needs of our aging facilities. And we've done some things that are yielding results from an energy project perspective, but there are other things that, you know, we look at every single year and we have to prioritize. So we need to have that growing revenue moving forward, and that's why, you know, the earned income and moving that PI money into the inside millage really is advantageous as a long-term strategy because it creates a growing fund to meet the existing needs of our facilities.
And potentially some unexpected ones. If we're
And some expected. We're in a better position to address the unexpected. Yeah.
Okay, second point, the difference in the two levies, the one versus the 1 1/4, is that the 1 1/4% levy will allow us to take on some capital expenses related to the stadium over a 3-year period. That would include being able to replace the natural grass with an artificial turf that will make the stadium much more usable for not just football, but also for soccer, field hockey, lacrosse, band. And so have a lot more uses for that field. It will allow us to replace the stands and the press box. The stands are not in the greatest of shape. The press box is not ADA compatible, and getting to it is not ADA compatible. It will allow us to do that, and will allow us to replace the concession stand, restrooms, have an actual changing area and locker room in the stadium, so teams don't have to go all the way back to the high school to change, and things like that to improve the facility. The 1 1/4% income tax will allow us to absorb all of those, you know, at least to the extent we are unable to get private funding to do that.
And that point was to our previous discussion. The board asked, you know, what additional could be funded from an athletics area, because I think if anyone looks at our facilities, the athletics is our glaring need right now. Because right now we do have a football stadium because the natural surface, you can't have multiple sports playing on it at any one time because it will be torn up. But it's more broad than that. It's the stands, it's the concession area, it's the locker rooms, all those things. So we in addition to our facility plan, we also had an athletic facility plan that we worked with MSA sport out of Cincinnati to develop a look at what could be possible in that area. And so the higher income tax would accomplish those three aspects of that plan. The lower plan would not, or the lower percentage would not.
Okay. The last point, and again, there's a caveat that comes with this. Given our current assumptions and the current school funding plan and things like that, we believe either of the options will carry the district at least through 2024 without having to come back for new money, of course. You know, if the situation, if the environment we're working out of changes, then the bets may be off there. But at least given where we are right now, we believe this will at least last until 2024.
And Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a 5-year term, so it would require a renewal in 2022, correct?
That is 23.
2023?
Right, because we'll be on the belt in 18.
Oh, that's right. Thank you.
Yes, we would anticipate doing this as a 5-year levy. So yes, it would require renewal, but it would be, again, our only levy that requires renewal, since we'll be letting the PI levy, which we currently have to renew every 5 years, go away. The impact of the two taxes, and now what you're looking at is the current forecast, so the forecast that was at the bottom of the previous slide, against first the 1% and then the 1.25% earned income tax. From previous discussions, my goal through this has been so that in the 21-22 school year, that we will have built up some cash balance and also still be operating in at least a balanced nature, if not still taking in a little bit more than we are spending. You'll see, I'm projecting a $99,000 operating surplus. That's essentially, that's rounding error in a $28 million budget. So it's essentially a balanced budget with about a $5.2 million cash reserve built up, which will allow us to go at least a couple of years beyond there. This will fund the operating costs of the district. At best, it could allow for some partial money towards turf, but it certainly would not allow for this is a source of revenue for the stands or the press box or the other improvements. But again, with some breaks and some of our things going forward, we would probably be able to squeeze out at least part of what it would take to replace the turf only.
So are there capital expenditures in this forecast with the 1% income tax relative to turf specifically?
No.
No.
Okay.
It is assumed that no money, right now it is assumed that no money would be used towards the athletic facilities to get to these results. I'm saying, we may be able to squeeze several $100,000 out of it with a couple things going right. I think there's potential to do that.
And
Go ahead.
a field is $600,000 or $700,000 for the field alone?
It's usually about $800,000 initially.
Okay.
Because of site work and
Yeah.
track and all those kinds of things.
Okay.
And then replacement can drop down to
Yeah.
600.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, the 1.25% earned income tax. This does have those three projects built into the forecast. So this is basically what we're doing with the 1%, plus it is assumed that the expenditures would include the costs of the turf, the stadium renovation, and the different stadium renovations over a 3-year period, where we take on one of each of those three projects per summer for 3 consecutive years. And you see, even with that, we are projecting in 2022 a little bit lower cash balance at that point, but still operating at a surplus of over $1.3 million. So we will probably continue building up the cash balance for at least one more year beyond the forecast period before we start being on the downward side of the levy cycle. So again, it's pushing us out at least to 2024 with this, including being able to do the athletic facilities. As an idea, the extra 0.25% is worth about $1.2 million per year once the tax is fully up and running, once we're past the phase-in period for the tax. Final thoughts, just wrapping up, and then we can move into the discussion. In reality, because of the ramp-up period I just talked about with the income tax, 2018 is our really our only opportunity to do an earned income tax. If we are not successful, whether that be May or if we had to do a second attempt, if it failed in May and we chose to do that, waiting till 2019, the ramp-up is too slow. And we start running into cash problems because of the slowness coming in. In either case, we would, as we mentioned earlier, look for a 5-year term for the income tax, at least initially. And so that would, as Jeff said, it would require a renewal in 2023. And just reiterating the first slide, the 2.75 million or mills in the PI budget allow us to meet our capital needs, which average over $1 million a year. And what this includes is mechanicals, concrete and asphalt flooring, furniture, technology, bus replacement. We do some musical instrument stuff and some other stuff in there. It will allow us to do all those things and meet the routine schedules that were developed in the analysis that Jeff referred to a little bit ago as we looked at our 20-year plan. So that's just kind of an overview to get us started. Any questions before we?
Just kind of from a timing clarification perspective about 2018 being our opportunity for earned income tax, if we were to need to run again in the fall of 2018, we would still have the opportunity to choose an income tax potentially at that point?
Yes.
Or we would have to.
No, whether an income tax passes in May or November, it doesn't take effect till January 1st of the following year.
Okay.
So from that standpoint, it doesn't matter. Where our problem comes in with the income tax is if you look out, out here in 2020 and 21, as our cash balances start getting lower, you can see the pattern of the tax coming in. Now this is the 1 1/4, so it's a little bit higher. While we would expect it to generate about over $5.9 million once fully implemented, we would only get about $340,000 of that in fiscal year 2019. Now, right now, we have that $3.2 million projected balance. We have the cash that we're able to absorb, only getting $300,000 from the new levy in 19. And then it builds up to about 80% in 20. And again, or in the second year, if you push all of this out a year, now all of a sudden we're out in 20, and it's a little bit harder to only get $300 and some thousand in 20, and then 21 is, we're already in a deficit, and now you're in a situation where if a couple of things don't go our way in the budget, we are looking at a potential cash issue like the stuff that we were going through a few years ago when we would get to January and wondering whether we would have enough cash to make payroll without borrowing. I would rather not be in that situation again. That was not a whole lot of fun doing that. And I think we risk, if the income tax is put off a year, I think we risk getting into that situation in the 2019-2020 school year.
What guidance does our cash balance guidelines or policy give us relative to the out years and what that's going to be telling us according to this forecast? Like, I'm trying to just use that guideline that we've
Right.
already established a
The-
little bit as a metric for
Right.
understanding how this
The
is gonna play out.
guideline is about 10%, is 10% of the revenue, the prior year revenue. And so if you take a look at fiscal 19, we're projecting about $28 million of revenue. So 10% of that's about 2.8 million. And we're expecting to finish the year at 3.2, so we're above that. And if you look at the cash flow balance graph that's in the back of the financial report, we are above the threshold all but 2 months of the next 2 fiscal years. January, because that's our low point, we fall below there, but jump right back up. But you get out to 2020 at $1.8 million, and we are going, at that point, we are well below the threshold, and we'll probably be below the threshold a number of months in 2020 if we don't do anything. And part of the problem we run into is where we've got about $1.5 million swing from June 30th to January 30th in our cash. And so we're looking at $1.8 million there. A couple things don't break our way, and we're looking at $1.5 million there. And now all of a sudden we're looking at something approaching zero in January, which is where we were right before we passed the levy in 2013, when the board had to give me authority to go to the bank and take out a short-term loan to meet payroll, just in case. And again, I would rather not have to be in that situation, and I think we're planning in a way that we won't be in that situation.
And what, in this scenario, what are the capital costs that you've included in the forecast for the field, the bleachers, the turf? What's the full kind of package, or what's the 3-year scenario of the capital improvements, and how much?
It's about $850,000 the first year. Well, it would be the second year, it's like 19 to do the turf, followed by, it was a 1.6, then 1.3, or 1.3, then 1.6.
1.3 and then 1.6.
Okay, 1.3 million the next year to do the stands and the press box, and then 1.6 million the following year to do the restrooms, the concession stand, the lockers, and those things. So all in all, what's that, about $3.7 million, $3.8 million over a 3-year period.
Thanks. The other thing is, it's a kind of a constant question, like sort of hitting a moving target a little bit. It's like you get good news, you get bad news, and usually it's bad news more than good news. I'm not sure you plan for bad news you don't know about, because I think you have to kind of manage through that process in any case. Each time we look at a 5-year forecast, even in the interim sense and so forth, there's just always a little bit of dynamics to it. Is that normal, or are there other school districts facing this, or how do we be about that?
You're set up in a situation where we're doing a 5-year forecast, and 30 to 35% of our revenue is on a 2-year cycle.
Right.
So that's a challenge that every school district faces, is we don't know what the legislature may or may not do with the school funding formula next year. At the time, in 19 at the time of the budget. We don't know what they're going to do. But we also, we can't just wait around and wait to see what they're going to do, because you're still not going to know what they're going to do 2 years after that. Mm-hmm. So I think where we are with our planning is we are doing this far enough ahead of where we get into a more severe cash situation that we have the flexibility to deal with things not going how we had hoped, because we are not waiting to the point where we fall off the cliff if we don't pass something. And I think that's really a prudent course that we have to take, recognizing the environment that we're working in.
The other thing, challenge, when you're forecasting 5 years, like a little bit of change in 1 year magnifies, like you said, 5 times. And there's some key assumptions that could change a little bit, like one that I have a question about is healthcare, right? How do we get a 5-year sense for what healthcare escalation costs will be, and what did you put in here relative to what your general sense is?
The
of whether that's
forecast that is
conservative
in
or-
here assumes a 10% increase on January 1st of 19, which is the maximum increase that we can get under the agreement that we reached with Medical Mutual back in the fall. And then 12% a year after that, which is the high end of kind of market movement. We believe that with the new plan that we have and working with the association and working with our employees to help educate and make everyone better consumers of healthcare, we believe we have a good chance of staying below those growth rates. That was part of what we were trying to do through.
Yeah, that's kind of the whole motivation, is to keep healthy, right? To do that
Right.
and so forth.
And I mean,
kind
we're,
of change the
we're-
trajectory of this
that's-
curve, and I think we're really on the
That's
right
so
track
much
there.
of what we've been trying to do with the changes that we're making.
Yeah.
Is to take steps to control that, and if they work, and we are optimistic they will, it's pretty big, it's pretty opportunities for pretty big de-escalation of costs relative to what's in the forecast, which will help everybody as we move down the road.
Yeah.
Any more questions for Mike at this point? No? Okay.
Thanks, Mike.
Yep, so we've reached the point in the agenda where we're going to entertain public comments. If you'd like to address the board, please come to the podium and speak for 3 to 5, say your name and address and speak for 3 to 5 minutes. Nobody?
Good evening, how are you? I'm Amy Mullins. I'm a parent, teacher, and GEA president. I just have a clarifying question, Mr. Brown. I heard you say that the 1.25 tax increase over 3 years, you're going to do the turf and football stadiums. What else will be done through the schools for improvement? Because that's all I heard. So I was like, wait a minute, red flag.
On top of that,
Thank you.
athletic was the current facility plan. So, all those things are still in the plan from our 20-year regular maintenance plan. Okay. Yep.
Can I just clarify too on because it's a great question. What we're talking about is a levy and how much we might want to put on the ballot. We're not approving funding for any particular project yet. I mean, that's for future additions of this board to do should the community approve the levy and the board has to address whatever the capital needs are at the time, and it may well be that something else occurs that requires some of that money. So, terrific question. The presentation was a response to a question that the board posed, which is if we were to choose the 1.25 over the 1, what might that allow us to do? And that's really what the discussion is.
I would be careful though with how you message that, because after watching this, it seemed like that extra 0.25 is like a stadium tax in a way. So just as we move forward, that emphasis shouldn't just be put on the stadium.
Right. Well, and I think what I was trying to communicate at the beginning was, this really is our maintenance plan for the next 20 years. And every single year, we go through a budget or a process, and these are the documents that create what we're gonna do that year to address the physical needs of the district. Like at next year at GES, we have a rooftop unit number 11 that is our biggest unit that has to be replaced. So, that's already embedded into what our current plan is for next year. So this is the priority. The maintenance of our buildings is the priority. If we were to go to the higher plan, the options are there if the board chooses to direct the budgeting process to take care of them. I will tell you that, you know, when I look at risk management, one of our areas of risk is our stadium complex from a seating capacity, or not capacity, structural integrity perspective. So, you know, it's one of those things that I think this board is going to have to address one way or another in the future in order to be able to house or host games. But right now, it's part of our regular maintenance, preventative maintenance, to try and make sure that that area is up to safety codes.
Yeah, I think, expanding just a tiny bit on that, the movement of the 2.75 inside mills to fund our PI, that is to fund what Jeff just held up. And that will be done whether we do 1% or 1.25%. It's just the extra 0.25% that will generate the money to, I think, both allow us to do the things around the stadium athletic facilities, and also, once some of those things are done, to provide even a more stable base of overall funding beyond the 5 years, to give us more opportunities, maybe to not have to go back to the voters again, asking for new money as soon.
And the annual revenue from 2.7 mil PI levy is?
It's about $1.7 million.
A little more than the 0.25%, right? Which is 1.2 million. Yeah.
Right. One mill is going to generate, I guess it's a little less than that. One mill will generate about $520,000, I think, with our new valuations.
Okay.
And so maybe I guess it's more like about $1.4 million then that the 2.75 will generate.
Thank you.
Board discussion?
Yeah, well, we've
Sounds
already
like
started.
we're
Yeah,
right
we've
into it,
already
yeah.
started. So I was
Sorry.
not
That's
gonna
fine.
sort
No,
of-
that's, yeah,
Just
there
gonna
it
sort
goes.
of keep on going, so we're, I think we've laid out all of the issues and, you know, the potential for what, you know, we will and won't be able to do with a 1 versus a 1.25.
And on the agenda, we have 2 resolutions, so we intend to pass both resolutions tonight for a final decision of what to take to the second step to the Board of Elections in January. So, you know, we have both resolutions for the earned income tax on the agenda in Mike's section tonight.
Yeah, the issue we have is we can't take something to the Board of Elections if we don't have a certification from the Department of Taxation, and they can only give us 1 certification per resolution. So in order to keep the choice open between the 2, we have to pass 2 separate
Great.
resolutions tonight to keep the ball rolling.
That's a good way to do it.
Leaving our options
Yep.
open.
I think during to start this conversation, you know, our responsibility to you and to the community is to operate in a way that, you know, instills confidence in the community that we spend money appropriately. And what we do is present options and say this is what we prioritize. 90% of what we prioritize is what happens in the classroom. And you see that in all the things that were just discussed as far as the continuous improvement plan. But, you know, we are at that stage where our facilities matter now too. And so spending taxpayer dollars to address facility needs is a necessity, but we want to always try and balance that with the academic side of the equation from an operating standpoint. But I think our product speaks for itself, and we have a continuous improvement mentality. We will continue to evolve our program at every level of the organization.
You had mentioned public-private opportunities. So if we were to do that, and we were able to raise money for other athletic facilities, that would actually extend then the life of the levy. So is that something we are gonna pursue?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes,
So-
I think in any situation where you are trying to address some facility needs that are considered extracurricular in nature, it is in your best interest to pursue a public and private partnership. and we will do that, whether, we have the money there or not.
How do we get a sense from the community about that opportunity and what might come forth from it and so forth? Are there other kind of like comparables? Like I think about Wildwood Playground, like I'm not sure how much they've raised, but it seems like it's a bunch of money for the Wildwood Playground. I would think that's an interesting metric for us to use in terms of the appetite of the community to pursue some kind of, public-private partnership thing like that.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get a sense so that in the budgeting process, we can know how much funding we're going to have to drive ourselves versus externally? Is there a way to get a?
I mean, they have raised, I think, $450,000 right now. I think they're looking for $500,000 total. Is that- Okay. So, I mean, that gives you an idea of what they've raised thus far. And
That's encouraging.
Yeah.
Right? That kind of number makes me think, wow, I mean, there is support in the community. If we can get $500,000 for a playground at Wildwood, which is a wonderful thing to support our community, I would think that, a stadium and the turf and the benefits to all the different teams and things like that, I would hope that over the course of a 3-year plan or something like that, we could drive significantly more, for our school district than we have for that playground. But I can't budget
I
on
would
that
say
necessarily. I don't know how to.
in general, a private partnership or private-public partnership to do turf at $800,000 is usually reasonable. To do a stadium complex where the total is over, $2 million for turf and the stadium, and then you have the concession area and other things, you're probably going to have the need for a heavier emphasis on the
Sure.
public, not
Yeah.
private.
But I think they'll kind of both grow commensurately, right? So I mean,
We'll do both.
I don't think there's if we can get, half of a field, $400,000 in 1 year, I would think we could also get, a big portion of other assets for future years as it's part of a package or something like
Yep.
that.
I think that's a tough lift when you have parents paying for school fees, paying for extracurriculars, paying for this, and then doing this on top of it to then say, well, help us build a new stadium now. And I think that's something that professional fundraisers would need to look at the community, assess,
Yeah.
and do that kind of stuff to see if that money's there, because this is a highly donated or asked to donate community. And I think that we can't rely on saying we're going to get $400,000 from wherever.
Yeah.
For the school district, when I'm already paying taxes for the school district. I don't know, that's my opinion.
Yeah, that's where I kind of wish I had a better sense of, comparable districts and things like that. Like, where's the less comparable district that's tried to do this project in a similar kind of, situation, and what have they come up with? Can we look at a couple of those and see?
This is
I don't
not
know.
a comparable,
Uh-huh.
but Lakewood initiated a private
Mhm.
fundraising effort, and after, I believe, 2 years, Kevin, the board stepped in and said, we're gonna have to cover
Sure.
more of the expense. And so they didn't satisfy it through a private standpoint, but they did, accomplish it through a public-private merger.
Do you know the magnitude of that investment, or?
I can't speak.
I don't know. It was a stadium?
It was a turf, stadium, and concession area and changing.
So it was probably a similar order of
And
magnitude.
track, yeah.
So it's similar order of magnitude.
It is.
Right? I mean,
Yep.
anyway, slice it, probably similar.
Oh, no. I thought you had a. Oh,
Yeah.
right, I think one thing we have to keep in mind is that, our stands we're looking at a safety issue sooner probably rather than later. So that's not just a pie in the sky kind of thing. If we want to be able to continue
Sure.
to host games and things, I think we have to, that's going to be an issue. But then I also, look at it as, if we are able to do a project like this, then it's going to touch so many more kids than what we touch now in terms of expanding who can use the stadium, for their extracurricular activities. But then we also would be able to host things in which we would raise revenue. So that's, another possibility for offsetting some of the costs. So like if we have a facility that has turf, then other like
You can host
OHSA,
OHSA
we can host,
events.
for lacrosse, soccer, field hockey, lots of different things, and so those are potentially revenue raising opportunities. So.
I guess I'd agree with you really on being able to expand the use of the field and the fact that, turf would give so many more opportunities to different sports and things like that, and give field hockey a level playing field, if you will, in many ways, right? But
At
I'm
least one that doesn't flood.
Exactly, right.
A significant rain event.
Right, and so I think that's kind of a worthy investment, and something that's sort of essential. Like, I guess I question more whether the $3 million stadium, right, also improves the quality of the experience for the students as much, right? I think that the experience that the students have in their extracurriculars and things like that is driven by that participation and the quality of their experience on the field. And it's a whole nother level of investment to look at the environment of that, which doesn't seem to me like is going to really dramatically change the experience that the students get out of it, right? But it'll make it nice to host some more events, and it'll make it nice for the community. It'll be like a sort of a showcase, but I'm not sure that the concession stand and the stadium and so forth, right, are contributing as much to student experience as the turf field is.
Let me just caveat that. So,
Yeah,
our-
this is a
our
conversation. I want to hear your
yeah,
perspective.
Our student section is in the section closest to the concession stand.
Mhm.
We are having conversations right now that we are gonna move the student section to the metal stands where the band plays right now, and have to potentially combine those two together, because, we don't want them in that section anymore. So, it's because they tend to get up and jump. And so, those are the kinds of things that, from a student experience standpoint, I guarantee you, they're gonna be upset when we move them.
Mhm.
Now, that's temporary, but those are the things that we have to look at in order to make sure that we have a facility that is, safe for all the sports to participate in. One of the things that, I'll bring you back to is when we add sports, one of the first questions on the board, from the board's consideration standpoint, is there an adequate facility? And I think it's an obligation of the board and the administration to make sure that we have an adequate facility for the sports that we have. We have 29 varsity sports. And so I think it's important to pursue public-private interests, but I also think that we have an obligation to make sure that we maintain, adequate facilities. So I think we have to look at this more holistically. In order to answer that first question. And I wouldn't change the number of sports. Kevin might, but I wouldn't change the number of sports that we have available to our students, because it is such a integral part of the academic experience, the experience of being a Granville student. It is the academics, athletics, and arts that really matter.
And if you look at the rate of participation, the consumption of these offerings, it's enormous.
Yeah.
It's approaching 90%.
Yeah.
And so there's this goes back to what we heard the principals talk about earlier in terms of balance and well-being and whole child. The extracurriculars that we offer in the arts, in science, in athletics, in other types of competition, are a huge part of what helps our children develop and prepares them for their futures. And so I think we've been very supportive of that historically by approving, what do we have down, 29 varsities? 29 varsity sports, which puts a lot of pressure on the athletic department, puts a lot of pressure on our facilities, and the folks who have to maintain them, but it's an enormous benefit to the students. But I want to go back a little bit, because while I think it's very important that we talk about, as we have, and as we should in the future, what we could do possibly with this the additional funds that might be generated if we went with the 1.25 over the 1.0. I think before we get too far ahead of ourselves, we have to think about where we are, which is, as Mike said, you know, and as Thomas has observed, we're in a constant cycle of uncertainty. We don't know what the legislature will do in the next biannual budget. What we do know is we're not likely to get more money out of them. We do know we have aging facilities, that our newest building in the district is what now, 16 years old? That the other buildings and the facilities that go along with them are significantly older than that, and that it's a constant challenge to try and maintain them. We do know that our permanent improvement levy is expiring, can't be renewed, and so we need to in some way address that shortfall in funding, both for the things we know, which are in that report that you have, and the things that we don't know, which haven't yet occurred, but we know will occur. If only we knew when and where. And so I look at the opportunity with an earned income tax, and it's no secret that I lean towards a 1.25 because it's an opportunity to put this district on much better financial footing than it has historically been. And we've been very prudent. This administration and this board and prior boards have been very prudent in how we spend money, and very aware, as you indicated, Jeff, about what our obligation is to the community. And so I don't think we take it lightly when we put out a request to the community for additional funds. But I do think it's, as I said, the opportunity to put us on better financial footing. Whether we elect or whether future boards elect to spend that money on a turf field or a football stadium, the reason I asked for that discussion is to give some context of what could be achieved. It may be that a future board decides that there's another more pressing use for that money. Maybe it's expanding another facility. Maybe it's doing something else. I'm not aware, and we haven't yet talked about it, but that will always change. You know, that we have any unmet needs now. I think we have taken great pains in the last number of years to really devote resources to critical things like one-to-one the Chromebooks, like funding PBL, like funding cultural programming and Spanish language in the elementary schools. And we will always make that our highest priority. But at the same time, we have to maintain facilities. We made that choice a year and a half, 2 years ago when we decided to undertake the water drainage problem at the high school, middle school, and which went under the tennis courts, and we fixed the tennis courts. And the tennis courts were more than anything else a health and safety issue. There were some of them that were just not usable. We had to fix the underlying problem, and we fixed the tennis courts on top of that. Those are the things that we do that we would, you know, if we could build something and it lasted for 75 years and we wouldn't have to worry about it, it'd be great, but that's not how it works. We replace buses on a regular basis. We replace boilers on a regular basis. I suspect we're going to find it's time to replace the football stands. And you know, we'll do that as effectively and prudently as possible when the time comes to do that, but as long as we invite our students and members of the community into our facility, we have an obligation to make sure they're safe. The turf field is to me, it extends the useful life of that field far beyond the scope, probably expands it by a factor of 5 or 10 times in the amount of students can use. I'm reminded of what we learned about Mr. Smith and the band who are preparing to go to Tampa for New Year's for the Outback Bowl. They're borrowing space in the Mitchell Center in Denison. They've taped off on the floor there a football field so they can practice their marching. If we had a turf field, they could march there. It's just the uses of that facility would be significantly increased if we did that. And again, I'm not saying that's what we're going to do. I really am focused on what I think is the right request to the community, and it is only a request to the community that that we could raise money that puts us on better financial footing to deal with whatever changes within reason come from the state, whatever continuing unfunded mandates come from the state or the federal government, which we know will happen. Surprises that may occur if we end up having to replace another roof or another boiler or something else. It gives us it really allows us to build up some cash to deal with the physical needs of our district. And while those aren't as, that's not why we came on board here. We want to deal with the educational, psychological, emotional needs of the kids. We have to provide a good atmosphere and a safe atmosphere. And so that's why I think that discussion goes. But again, I come back to the underlying issue here is what puts us on the best financial footing going forward so that this board or future boards can make those decisions. Agree?
Doing the income tax, it's not necessarily, that's designated PI or operations, right? So that gives us a lot of flexibility. Like whereas a PI levy has to go towards
Correct.
like buses and things like that, but doing the earned income tax allows us that, that flexibility to, again, if the state or the feds change something, we can shift our plan.
Correct. We view this as an operating levy, which gives the most flexibility for the use of the money.
Correct.
Right. So something could come up that we would prioritize, like you just said, we don't know that,
Absolutely.
everything that's coming
Right.
down the road, so.
The difference is, if you think about it, if we do as an operating tax and all of a sudden we've got to replace a boiler we weren't expecting to replace and it's $400,000, which even on an extended PI levy, that is a hard amount of money to come up with when you weren't expecting it all at one time. We would have the resources as a one-time expenditure out of the operating budget. What you don't have by reversing it is if you put, say we put more in PI to think, just in case that boiler
Right.
dies, but the boiler doesn't, but now something happens and all of a sudden we have a $500,000 hole in the operating side, you can't
Flip it back.
you can't by law do the opposite. You can't take something that was done for PI and spend it in the operating budget.
Which again, I think speaks to your desire to to implement a mechanism that gives us the most flexibility and puts us on the strongest financial footing going forward. Any other thoughts or comments or concerns or?
So, there is a decision point approaching. It is January 8th, our organizational / regular meeting. So, we will work to identify what will be the action item that we will present to you. Okay, as a recommendation.
Thank you. Good. Thanks for the presentation.
Yeah.
Good. Action agenda?
All right, action item 10.01 is to establish the president pro tem for said organizational meeting.
So moved.
Okay. Okay, typically we've done this prior to the board meeting starting. This is more procedurally accurate. So it will establish Jen as the president pro tem.
Any questions?
You want to do it?
I think that's what we decided.
Yeah.
vote first.
No, I think that's what we decided
Yes.
was the appropriate, right?
Thank you.
Yes, fine. I'm happy to do it. Take the roll, please.
Mr. Janice?
Aye.
Mr. Cohen?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Dees?
Aye.
Dr. Cornman?
Aye.
Okay, next item is 10.02, Ohio School Boards Association membership.
So moved.
Any second?
Second.
Thank you.
Okay, this is our annual membership, and that should be for the 18 year. So we'll correct that. For all of their policy development work for us.
Any questions? Same as no
Yeah.
increase in.
It's the same per student amount. See if Greg-
Hi, Craig.
Great. Take the roll, please.
Ms. Dees?
Aye.
Mr. Janice?
Aye.
Mr. Cohen?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Dr. Cornman?
Aye.
10.03 is,
Should say 18 also.
yes, it should. 10.03 is the OSBA Legal Assistance Fund membership.
So moved as amended.
Yes.
One
Second.
Thank you.
Andrew.
Andrew.
Andrew. And the Legal Assistance Fund is OSBA's mechanism to support legislation or challenges to different court cases that impact education overall. The Supreme Court has had several education-related issues presented to it in the not so distant past.
And that annual cost is just $250.
Any questions? No? Take the roll, please.
Ms. Davis. Aye. Mr. Cohen.
Aye.
Mr. Janice.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Dr. Corman.
Aye.
10.04 are the board policy adoption. It's the second read and approval for the listed policies.
So moved.
And a second?
I have nothing further to add.
Any questions about the policies listed? No. All right, take the roll, please.
Mr. Janice.
Aye.
Ms. Davis. Aye. Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Cohen.
Aye.
Dr. Corman.
Aye.
Next is 11.01 A through D. in the
So-
consent agenda.
So moved.
Thank you.
So I'd like to highlight a couple of things. Obviously, there are several donations from Science Olympiad to Physical Education, Archery Club, and the music donation, or our music department. So we appreciate those donations. I would also call your attention to the resignations. I, regret to recommend to you Scott Kruger's resignation, and Bobby Seidel, who has been our field hockey coach for the past several years, has resigned and is looking for some downtime. She's coached for 20-some years, so we appreciate all of their service to this community. The leaves of absences include several maternity leaves and we have some field trips.
Any questions about the consent agenda?
No.
No? Take the roll, please.
Mr. Janice.
Aye.
Ms. Davis. Aye. Mr. Cohen.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Dr. Corman.
Aye.
Thank you.
Finances.
Finances.
Discovery field trip on my calendar.
First was the November financial report.
And second?
Second.
Thank you.
Yeah, the basics of the report, you heard in my updated five-year forecast. The main points, the $54,000 we've been waiting for from SERS finally showed up. Unfortunately, it did not show up by November 30th. So it is not reflected still in this report. It showed up, it was either the 1st or 4th of December. It was one or the other that showed up. So that will finally manifest itself and be gotten out of the expenditures. And nothing else has really happened. We did get our STRS notification for the upcoming year today, and that's actually going to be about $4,000 less a month, or pay for $4,000 per pay, which is twice a month, less than we are doing right now, which means, it's all based on estimates, and it means I must have overestimated the salaries a little bit. So that's a good thing. It'll cost us a little bit less to get caught up. And that's really about it. Everything else is pretty much well under 1% of what we've been expecting it to be doing at this point of the year.
Any questions about the monthly finances? No? All right, take the roll, please.
Ms. Davis.